Hello, welcome. We are the intern ministers at Community Church of New York in Manhattan.
We are Unitarian Universalists in the process of becoming ordained clergy.
In this podcast, we delve into the life of an intern minister.
We explore the ways our lives and internships intersect and how this is ministerial formation.
I'm Meagan Henry.
I'm Carrie McAvoy. And
we're
Rev'ing Up!
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rev'ing Up. It's so good to have you here listening or watching and listening. I am coming to you from my childhood home in Oregon, and just so glad to be here. It's good to see you again, Meagan. I've been away for a little bit.
Yeah, it's great to see you. I'm so glad we're catching back up and getting back into the routine after the holidays and before the next set of holidays and in the midst of another set of holidays.
Yeah. So just wanted to remind our listening and watching community that you can always reach out to us at podcast@ccny.org. We also have a listener community on Facebook. Just you can see how to get there from wherever you're getting this podcast. In the notes, there should be some directions on how to join our Facebook group. And also, I am excited to announce the date for our live event. It will be on December 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern. So we would love to have you join us. And as we always say, this is a community and a conversation. So you are a critical part of that.
Yes, yeah. big jazz hands to
yes!
all of that.
Yes.
It was so fun doing that last live event, and it was the first time any of us had done it, and our producer Amy and the two of us in a room together, and then all of our listeners chiming in and asking us real-time questions, and that conversation was just so fun. And maybe this time we'll have a special guest or two in person. We'll see.
Yeah, more excitement. So last podcast, Meagan, you and I talked about generosity and the spiritual practice of generosity. So I'd really be interested in carrying that discussion into stewardship and the fact that congregations need money to exist and to fulfill their mission. So I'm curious what we're learning about the minister's role in setting a culture, let's say, of spiritual generosity and spiritual practice of generosity, and also actually paying the bills. What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm. I'm taking a class at Meadville Lombard right now called Tools for Parish and Nonprofit Administration. And one of the things that we've been talking about in that class is fundraising and the minister's role. And the things that I'm learning that are kind of intuitively I picked up on from working in congregations before, but because I've never been in the role of minister, I didn't really know what the expectation is of the minister's involvement, other than usually there's a stewardship campaign that's run by, or a canvas, and it's run by like a team, and they do an annual ask of people to fill out their pledge forms for the next year. And those pledges are what help to the congregation see like how much money are we going to bring in and what kind of are we going to meet our budget. And if we're not, what's the gap in between and what can we do to make that up? Or, it's just a really important part of being in a spiritual community is financially supporting that community. And so the minister's role varies depending on the congregation and also on the minister. So my experience has been that ministers will preach a sermon on stewardship, general theme, whatever the theme is for the campaign that year, on Celebration Sunday or Canvas Kickoff Sunday or Stewardship Kickoff or whatever that's called. And then there's a team of volunteers who are the people who kind of like carry that vision forward for the next, 6 weeks or however long they've set as their goal for the stewardship campaign. So I think what I learned is that for some ministers, they see it as one of their job to speak directly to the congregation about the needs and to be an example to the congregation by even saying from the pulpit, like, look, you all know how much money I make. You see it in the budget every year. I'm telling you, this is how much I'm pledging. This is my tithe. This is why I do it. Talk about that story, that essential story that moves you. Like, why do I as the minister do this? Like, why is this so important? How do I see this as such a vital community? And it changes people's lives. And I see that as the minister. And here's an example of a person's life who's been changed by it. And that's why I give money to this. And this is how much I give, and blah, blah, blah. And will you join me? I'm inviting you to please join me in also giving 5% or something like that. And a funny thing that our professor said was, you can also be really authentic and say, in most religious communities, you're expected to tithe 10%. And here, look, I'll give you a break. Just tithe 5%, or something like that. Like, make it funny, make it personal, talk about how much one gives as the minister. These are all new things to me. I just thought that the minister just like preached a generalized sermon about giving and how important it is to support the congregation and the ministry and the vision of the congregation, but not making it so personalized. So I'm curious, Carrie, is what I'm saying, are you thinking like, oh, I've never seen that before, or, oh yeah, that's totally the way I thought it was supposed to be done? What has been your experience with this?
So my experience with this, for one, there's a whole dialogue over whether the minister should be a member of the congregation or not, or
right,
paying membership dues or not, or membership, donating to the church or not. So that's a whole varies by culture to culture, congregation to congregation. So there's that aspect. There's also, I think my experience of UU congregations is that it's not always obvious how much people should be pledging. If, like my experience when I came into the congregation, I never got any guidelines on what an acceptable amount was.
Oh, right.
And also many of our UU congregations are not even comfortable talking about money at all. So we don't talk, the members don't talk to each other saying, hey, this is why I donate this much because I feel like, excuse me. And,
oh, you got a little cold out there, didn't you?
I did.
I'm sorry.
So I think part of the minister's role is really to guide culture change, to kind of set expectations around how much people should be giving, whether it's money or time or resources or something like that. Why it's important to invest your time, talent, and treasure in a congregation. And also, I think sometimes our congregations, particularly with new members, they come in with a consumeristic kind of attitude about it. So, people might think I just go to church and I put $20 in the plate and stuff, and that's the extent of my involvement. So, I think for me as a minister, what I would want to do is kind of help guide the culture change. How can we be talking about generosity as a spiritual practice, not just on the sermon on the amount once a year, but ongoing. What is generosity? how do we really create an environment of generosity and understand what it takes to make this congregation work and how that changes your own spiritual journey to be a part of that.
But wait, did you really just say the Sermon on the Amount?
I did.
That's so great. I've never heard that. I love it. That is, yes, that's so good. The Sermon on the Amount.
Yep.
I love that.
Yep.
So, okay, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. There's some things that are popping up for me. One is around the abuse of power, right? Like I watched this like prosperity gospel preacher with a patient this summer because that's like what he wanted to do when I was in my CPE, and he was like really wanting to like watch this religious show. And because I was a chaplain, he was like, "You like religion, right? Like, here, come watch the show with me." And it was just so disturbing. But also we had a good conversation about it. But I think for me, it's really important for people to understand that we're not doing that thing where it's like, well, if you don't give to this community, you're not welcome here, or you're not going to be like, there's not, like, heaven is not open to you somehow, like whatever that translation might be for Unitarian Universalists. In whatever community, it could be that the beloved community is not open to you because you're not giving enough, or, whatever that could be. And I think a lot about, especially in the Brooklyn congregation that I serve, it's there are just tons of, like struggling young adults who are living in group houses with 5 other people and working multiple jobs so that they can live in New York City. And it's tough. And as the minister, I don't want to get up there and make them feel crappy because they're not giving enough. And at the same time, I want them to feel like a part of this thing. Like, I want them to be able to be feeling really welcomed and a part of it. So how to strike that balance? And I think as the minister, there's like pastoral issues that come up when you're talking about giving money. Because money is so triggering for people. Money is one of the big things that really can, like, just talking about it can turn people off. And so it's a nuanced thing. And I don't know the answer yet. And I hope that I can kind of come into my own as a minister in a congregation that I really get to know very well, so that I understand how to talk to them about this in a way that's going to not alienate people, that's going to bring everyone into the big tent of welcome and beloved community, as opposed to talking about money in such a way that makes some people feel bad and excluded and like they don't belong. Right. And at the same time, like, it's important. I know when I give money, I feel so much more I feel in touch and in tune and invested, and like I'm a part of the bigger picture. So can I do that if I'm only able to pledge $100 a year? Will I still feel that good when I know that there's people pledging $1,200, right? Like, how do we, and is it possible to ask the people who have more resources and more money to consider that part of what they're doing is giving a little bit extra to help cover some of those young folks who are just coming out of college with tons of debt and can't find a professional job and are working at bookstores and restaurants and as baristas just to try to make it by until they can get that kind of like salaried professional job with benefits. It's the big C community, the whole thing. How do we all, some of us give a little bit, some of us give a medium amount, some of us give a lot, and that changes over time as to who can afford what. And there's always going to be people in each of the different generations and age group categories who are going to fall at different places on that scale.
Yeah, another nuance to all of that, well, in particularly around stewardship campaigns, I've heard some controversies over, like, the minister being expected to talk with the major donors. And I think about, like, almost bought access to the minister, like,
oh yeah,
that's kind of something I really think about. Like, I can see how congregations with large donors are really tricky, and that's sometimes the best way to get resources, like one person, more resources, but also that, or having a special dinner for the major donors or something like that. So what do you think about that?
Well, I always hear this thing that I've never had lots of money in my life, so I don't know what it is to be that person. But what I've heard is that if you like people who have lots of wealth, when you spend some money on them, they are more generous or something. Like, have you heard this? Like, I don't know how it all works. I really need to talk to a professional fundraiser to find out. I think that there is something to be said for having a special get together for the folks who are all the big donors who the campaign is asking to donate first, to make their pledges first, so that when you go into the kickoff, the celebration Sunday, you can say, we've reached out to all of our board members and some of our big donors, and so we're able to actually start up our campaign with already $150,000 pledged of the $300,000 we need to raise this year. So you've got like a little cushion, a pillow or like a jumping board. I don't know, all the metaphors to start off on Celebration Sunday. I think there's something to be said for that. I think that the danger is in what you say around people who are big donors, who think that then they have extra say in what happens. They have extra access to the minister. They count more somehow. And I think that that's just really up to the culture and the minister to counter that by being very clearly well boundaried, and by establishing a culture of, I hear you, and if you threaten to take your money away, if you don't get your thing, take your ball and go home, I will not be pressured by that. Right. Mm-hmm. So when the donor comes and says, I don't want that Black Lives Matter banner on the front of the building, I'm going to take my $10,000 a year pledge and go home, then I think that that's the time to let that person go. I mean, I certainly wouldn't say immediately, well, then just go. But I wouldn't say, oh goodness, yes, let's take that down for you. No, I think that when people realize that they don't get their way by threatening, then that culture is being set, and that's a way to stay away from that idea that people who give more money have more say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've also heard of that weaponizing of pledging in like groups who are part of a particular program, and there's not enough money to give as much to that program in that year, so they will try to withhold their pledges. So that happens in groups as well.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's just a time when being that minister who has really good boundaries and is really firm and secure in your principles and values, and knowing that you have a committee on ministry and a board that really supports that. I think it's important to have those conversations with the leadership team every year also, so that you can all be on the same page together. And it takes a little while. Sometimes those cultures are really embedded, and it can be, I don't know, I've never walked into this situation as a minister, but I've seen others do it, and it can take a while to change the culture. Right. Yeah. But I think it's about being honest and clear, and having everyone, having the leadership on board. So it's not just falling on the one senior minister, but it's the whole leadership team together, who is together as the parents, not getting divided.
I want to talk about one other aspect, and that is kind of a generational move away from pledging towards giving on an ongoing basis, or just giving when the resources are available. And how do we handle that with budgeting? How can we make room for that in who is a member, who is not? I've heard a lot of these issues around how do we accommodate this alternate model of giving that is becoming a generational difference.
And what's the model as opposed to making a pledge for the year and then paying a monthly amount or whatever? But what's the alternative?
It's giving whenever they can, whenever they're at church or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's really,
that can be very tough to track, right? So you don't really know, like somebody might throw, $20 in the collection plate every Sunday and think that they are making a pledge, but there's nothing on record. Nobody knows that they're doing that, right? Yeah, I think it can be very difficult because one of the issues is that the people who are on the finance committee have to make a budget. They have to know that they're going to be able to pay the staff, that they're going to be able to pay the health insurance for the staff. There are a lot of justice issues involved just even in a congregation serving as an employer. So there needs to be they need to know that they're going to be able to be good employers and guarantee that the staff are going to have all of the benefits that they have been, hired with the promise of. So it can be, if there's no way to know how much money is going to come in during the year, it's very difficult to build a budget and know that you're going to be able to take care of your staff and fund your programs and your mission. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is to that. That's a tough one.
One of the things that I heard about in my administrative tools class was maybe even just changing the language from pledge to sustaining membership. Like for many public media kind of campaigns, they'll say, okay, just give $10 a month and we'll take it directly out of your your debit card or whatever. And so maybe just simple language change might change the dialogue a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. We should think of a way. I love sustaining member, and we should think of a way like another name for that so that it doesn't automatically make a person think of like their local NPR affiliate or whatever. Right. Because I think that's what they say, right? But it's such good language. It's like you're the person who is keeping. It's like Patreon, right? It's like when you pay $10 a month to support a Patreon, like your favorite podcast or whatever. I think that it's so important, and that's something that many young people are accustomed to and aware of. So what can we call it? That's a challenge for our listeners, I think. Could we please work on this? Let's work on it together on our Facebook community, our listening community, because this is something that we all need to figure out. And I think that there are going to be those of you out there who are going to start like Googling synonyms for these terms and come up with a clever phrase that we can start using. That would be amazing. So how about that? So shall we move this conversation to our Facebook group? And
totally.
Cool. Good. This has been good. I mean, it's an ongoing conversation, right? And I would love to hear what other people think about it. And like, should the minister be a member? Should the minister pledge? Should the minister say how much they're pledging, what their percentage is that they are giving to be a sustaining member? What are some of the suggested uses of language around that? How do you handle as a minister having to preach a new sermon on this topic every single year? There's only so much you could say about it, right? Or is it or not? Maybe there's just like a wealth of like topics out there that I'm just not tapped into. We would love to hear what you all, our beloved listener and community, have to say about that.
Absolutely. So thank you for being part of this ongoing conversation. We look forward to hearing from you at podcast@ccny.org. Don't forget about the live event on December 17th, is it? Yes, December 16th, 16th at 7 o'clock Eastern time.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Be well. We love you. See you next time. Bye.